and welcome to the fourth presentation for the 2022-2023 season of Avalanche Canada's webinar series. My name's Sarah Taylor and I'm your producer for this evening. Lisa Perazoli is also online and she'll be the moderator looking out for your questions in the Q&A box. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Over the last 2 years, we presented a variety of webinars and found that being online means we get to share our avalanche safety messaging with even more of you than before. So we're glad that you're here with us this evening, and we'd love to see you share these webinars with others throughout the season. Our mission is to help educate backcountry users so you can go out and play safe. We want you to know more, go further, and come home. First, we'd like to acknowledge that our session is being hosted in the territory of 4 nations: the Sinites, Chukwemek, Tinaha, and Syilx. As a national organization, we also acknowledge the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations on whose land we live and recreate. Before we start tonight, we'd like to thank our sponsors. We're very grateful for our sponsors and their loyal support for us during these challenging economic times. They work with us to reach backcountry users, and we're grateful for all of their support. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone is muted automatically. There are opportunities to ask questions, and to do so, you can hit the raise hand icon on the bottom of your screen, and I can unmute you so you can ask a question. You can also ask questions in the Q&A box, which is also at the bottom of your screen. Please use that Q&A box for questions rather than the chat box because they can be hard to spot in there. At the end of the webinar tonight, we've also got some goodies for Arc'teryx and Mammut that are up for grabs, so stick around for those. Tonight's presentation is to do with Avalanche Canada's new map and resources. This season, Avalanche Canada launched a new map with flexible forecast regions. You'll see this in action on Friday when we publish our first avalanche forecast for the season, but this new system provides more responsive backcountry regions that change in terms of where the conditions are. So those regions now change when the conditions do. We've made these changes to tackle one of the biggest challenges with our previous system, which was that conditions could vary significantly across our old regions. Tonight's webinar will also reintroduce you to some of the many resources we've got available on avalanche.ca that help you keep your winter fun and safe. Our presenter for this evening is Colin Garrity. Colin's been a forecaster for Avalanche Canada for 7 years and leads our field team on Vancouver Island, which is now in its 2nd season. And having that field team on the island helps us immensely with collecting data for forecasts, as well as sharing outreach and education events. So without further ado, I'll pass it along to Colin. Enjoy your presentation.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for that awesome intro. I love the image of the snowshoer finding his bliss out there. That's what we're going to be like very soon here. Is my screen showing up okay? I think I've got a little bit of a blockage there, but cleaned up.
Yep, looks good to me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to go into some detail about our new flexible forecast regions, maybe the biggest update to avalanche forecasting in Canada, and as long as I can remember, maybe the last 20 years even, since Avalanche Canada kind of started doing this stuff. There's a lot of other really great resources on the website too, so I'm going to go through flexible forecasts and we'll talk about some of that stuff too, the other resources and tools that we have available for you. But before we get into that, I want to find out a little bit about who you guys are. So Lisa, I believe, has a poll lined up to find out how you guys get around in the backcountry. What's your mode of travel? Are you snowmobiler, skier, snowshoer, hiker, ice climber, splitboarder? Which of those do you fall under? And we'll just kind of keep an eye on the poll. And Lisa, you can close it when you think we've got a decent number, say 70 or 80% or something like that. It's anonymous, so don't worry about outing yourself as a mode of travel person that that your friends wouldn't approve of or something like that. What do we got? I think it's tallying. I can't see the tally.
It looks like we've got just about 70% are skiers or snowboarders.
Awesome.
8% are sledders or snowbikers, just under 20% snowshoe or hikers, and then 4% ice climbers.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool to see some ice climbers in the crowd too. Lots of sledders out there in the hills these days, and it's good to see some representation here too. And not surprising to see a big contingent of skiers and boarders. Cool. I'm also curious to know a little bit about your level of training. So if you've attended like an avalanche awareness seminar or something along those lines, or like a workshop, read a book or those kinds of things, or if you've taken an Avalanche Canada training course like the AST1, the AST2, or if you're at that pro level, meaning you'd be into the Canadian Avalanche Association's Operations 1 or 2 courses or programs. Where are we at? It's tallying the drum roll. Cool, lots of AST1s, that's great. Yeah, we'll talk more about some of the training opportunities for folks who have the AST1 and folks who aren't quite there yet too. We got some pros in the audience, that's always cool, and some nuns. I think the no training, this is a really great presentation for folks who don't have a lot of exposure to this stuff, because you're going to get exposed to all the tools that you'll want to use on a daily basis with your daily process heading into the hills. And especially, and folks who have just got that little bit of like either a seminar, workshop, or reading of some kind, this is great for folks like you too. So great, welcome everybody. It's a little bit like looking at the slide here, this super diverse group of people that, we're kind of like this giant backcountry family that we run into each other in the hills every once in a while. And we all kind of approach the mountains a little bit differently. Maybe some folks are looking to get extreme, and I see somebody front pointing on some rocks there, or maybe you're just feeding the whiskey jacks, like one of the other shots that I see there. So there's lots of ways to do it. We all travel differently, but we do have the same goals ultimately. Everybody wants to go out there, have an adventure of some kind or another, and make it home at the end of the day. That's really the key, so we can do it all over again. So,
sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Colin, before you move on, we have someone's hand up.
Oh, okay.
I thought it would be a good time to.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Do we have a question?
It's from Dave.
Dave, what do you got for us? It might be an accidental
it looks like it might be.
Yeah, that happens.
It was early. Okay,
yeah, a little early in the program. That's cool. Thanks for letting me know, because somebody has questions, feel free to pipe up and we can address them as we go. Yeah, so ultimately the same goals. We want to make it home at the end of the day so we can do it all again tomorrow. And our tools, our resources are there for folks like yourselves to have the tools in your toolkit to approach days in the mountains safely and make good decisions while you're out there. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Of course, the big update is to our avalanche forecasts in terms of the flexible forecast system, but I'll talk about the mountain weather forecast, another really awesome resource, a bunch of our different educational resources, talk about the forecaster blogs, the Mountain Information Network, or affectionately known as the MIN, and the mobile app, which has some changes this season as well. To kick us off, it's probably worth starting on flexible forecast regions. So if you've taken a look at the map on Avalanche Canada in the recent days, you've probably already seen that it looks a little bit different than it has in the past with these kind of giant region blobs. And if you tuned into some of our kind of media kind of output over the last month or so, we released a sneak peek website where you could go and take a look at an example of what forecasts might look like in the future. So this is kind of one iteration of that, what you're seeing on the screen here. So definitely looks really unfamiliar if you're used to our kind of standard forecast regions. So pretty soon the homepage is going to look something like this, except the regions that you see here, this arrangement is very likely going to be different than what you see here. So I'll kind of start us off right at the top. Now when you look at the website, instead of just seeing danger ratings, like a danger rating icon on each of the regions, each region that's been created will be highlighted in the color of its highest danger rating. So if we've got considerable danger as the highest danger of the day in one of these given regions, then that region gets painted orange. And then as you hover around with your mouse on the website, you'll see this little danger rating hovering, and you can use that to just get a quick snapshot of what the name of the danger rating is, be it low, moderate, considerable, high, or extreme, and a really brief description, like for here, high, very dangerous avalanche conditions. If it was considerable, you'd have dangerous avalanche conditions. And then you can click on our danger ratings explained in our forecast to learn more about each rating. So it's worth doing that too, because Studies actually show that SFU studies that we've been partnered with SFU for some time, and their studies show that these ratings often get misinterpreted. So, it's worth thinking about, what the verbiage, the language behind each one of those ratings are, because it's a little bit different than like a green light or a yellow light or that kind of thing. These colors are, of course, based on the North American Public Avalanche Danger Scale. And you can learn more about that, of course, at avalanche.ca. Essentially breaks up avalanche danger into five danger levels. And then, the hovering is a great way to just kind of see at a glance which rating you're at. You'll also notice when you're on the page that, first, before I go too much further, you can turn those off. So if you find it like annoying, like moving around on the screen and that pop-up is kind of getting in your way, click on the top left. It's like a hamburger menu, this little kind of 3 stripes. Click on that, and then it's the same place that you would set your filter for the Mountain Information Network date range, or turning on and off the weather stations, those kinds of things. You've got a click or a little checkbox for the hover over danger rating. Turn that one off if you don't like it, and that's totally fine. Moving right along. So another update to the website is you've got a location search box up at the top left there next to that hamburger menu. So if you're not a fan of like zooming in on the map to find your destination, this is probably the tool that you're going to want to use. You'll type in the area that you're interested in, the area that you're going to. And we've got a lot of them. So you can search mountain ranges, peaks, drainages, popular riding areas. Pretty much, I think we've got over 200,000 place names logged in that location search. So it's probably going to show up. If you got a name that doesn't show up, we want to hear about it. Definitely get in touch with us. But yeah, there's a lot there to dig into. And then once you type in your location, click enter. It's going to zoom. The map's going to zoom in right on your. Actually, no, sorry. You'll click on the result that you want, and then that will zoom you right in on the location, and you'll see the danger rating, and you can click on the forecast from there on. So this is important because our regions are no longer fixed in space. That means they don't have names anymore. So those old familiar names like the Northwest Coastal and the Northwest Inland, like you would see this collection of regions previously was called, they don't exist anymore. Feel free to refer to those kind of informally, but we won't be using them in our forecast language or anything like that anymore. So yeah, it's a little sad to see them go. We got used to them for over so many years, but we're moving on, we're moving upward, onward and upward. So you can see from this image that our forecasts still cover the very same large area that we've always forecasted for. So the outline of our regions is the same, but the size and shape of the regions is now flexible. This allows us to determine boundaries based on actual avalanche conditions, and we can change those boundaries based on those conditions changing over time. Other things that might have us changing boundaries might be forecast weather, or maybe avalanche problems, things that we think are really going to be helpful for people to understand the conditions and respond to the conditions in the area that they're going to. And like Sarah said, we've made this change to tackle what was actually historically a fairly substantial problem at Avalanche Canada with some of our larger regions and some of our more kind of spatially varied regions, spatially diverse regions, where often we'd have to kind of cram more than one forecast's worth of information into a single forecast, because that's just what the region demanded. That's what the avalanche conditions were. And we had to find some way of explaining it to people. And to really tease out that nuance, you would have to click way into the avalanche forecast. You'd probably find it somewhere in the snowpack summary, or you might find, headlines that talked about the north of the region and the south of the region, or avalanche problems that say this avalanche problem will be more prevalent in the west of the region where more snow has fallen, those kinds of things. So we can kind of nix some of that spatially descriptive language now and let the spatial boundaries of the regions really speak for themselves. So it really allows us to focus in on the information that's most important for you. And it's a bit like it's a communications tool where it wasn't before. Previously, we just had these fixed lines and they didn't really mean much other than they're a handrail that we always knew where to click on because we knew the name of our region. Now they're quite meaningful. We can attach meaning, whether it's a danger rating or an avalanche problem or some other aspect of the forecast we can use to really visually identify So I think it'll be a really great update to the site. We're all very confident about it, actually. Yeah. Yeah, and so take a look here. You see the North Rockies, or what was we previously called the North Rockies region. They're still the North Rockies, of course, just east of Prince George and Quesnel there. So you've got the North Rockies and Caribous kind of smushed together. Here's one example of what you might see if maybe we had a persistent slab problem develop in that area. So it kind of comprises the kind of the east slope of the Caribous into the Kakwa of the North Rockies, a bit of Renshaw and Mount Robson there. If we became aware of like a deep persistent slab problem that was producing very large avalanches in an area like this, we would want to let you know. We want to highlight that in some way. And now we can do it very visually, very impactfully right on the map. So, you know, in the past, we would be trying to describe this kind of sub-region bubble some way in text inside the forecast, and text just doesn't have that same visual, of course, visual impact that just a simple image like this does. So we think it's going to make it a lot easier for you to understand the spatial component of our forecast. And yeah, it just makes for clearer communication, really. So here's the total outlay of or overview of all of our subregions that we've created for our new forecast. And so for Avalanche Canada's forecast regions, which includes everything essentially up other than the mountain parks, so Jasper, Banff, Yoho, Kootenay, Kananaskis Country, and Glacier National Park. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. We collectively have 92 subregions. And then the mountain parks, I can't remember the total count there, but I think we're with everybody in there, I think it's something like 120. And there are 3 other subregions. We didn't forget you, Newfoundland. You're there too. The Long Range Mountains got 3 subregions. We kind of created those in consultation with our field team that's based there. They really know the area quite well, so they're quite instrumental in developing those. And you can see here the old faithful subregions or forecast regions that we previously used. Those are kind of outlining the overall the subregion overview. So a couple of the notables here, you can see some of the more popular areas. So if I think of like the Southwest BC, like the South Coast, these get cut up into quite small regions. And then if you look at more remote, lesser frequented areas, these are generally larger. So the resolution we used definitely was informed by to some extent by the resolution of our understanding of various areas. The more we know about an area, generally the more we can split it up. And, you know, somebody who travels in Duffy Lake, you know, we've got one subregion for Duffy Lake. I think somebody who's familiar with that corridor could probably split Duffy Lake into probably a half dozen subregions. So there's still a bit of a limit that we placed on ourselves in terms of splitting things up. So, you know, they're not going to be totally uniform snowpack characteristics and things like that. There still is always going to be a component of using the forecast as a starting point, then going out into the field and evaluating conditions for yourselves, making observations and making sure that they match up with our forecast information, and understanding that, you know, this doesn't do away with spatial variability within regions. So, you know, Duffy Lake itself, it's one of the smaller subregions on here. The east side, the east slope of the Coast Range there, it's a lot drier than what you would see around the Cayuse summit. So, you know, expect there to spatial variability hasn't really gone anywhere. We've just helped by, you know, slicing up a little bit smaller so that we can contain things a little bit more easily, make some kind of broad scale groupings, but not haven't gone through these regions with a super fine tooth comb, because I think there's maybe a bit of diminishing returns that might happen there if we were to cut things up too small. This is a good starting point, but it's open for the future. We may revisit this in the future depending on feedback and how forecasters handle it. So yeah, it's open, but it's a good start. Here's just a bit of an idea of well, this is actually MIN reports, so reports on the Mountain Information Network that people have submitted. We've excluded all of our AvCan staff from these reports, so these are public reports, and they kind of get grouped. You might see they're quite small, these little dots, or they turn into like an orangish blob if there's lots of them. And then the subregions are around each of these, and the darker the subregion, the more hits there are, the more MINs there are. So places like the Spearhead, Brandywine, Duffy Lake. These are very popular areas, lots and lots of MINs in those. And you can see some of the more far-flung regions. We've named our subregions very kind of in a very basic fashion. They're not very descriptive of the locations, and we don't use them externally. It's kind of an internal just naming for forecasters to talk about them. So if we look up at the Hamathco ice field or near Taseko Lakes, I think Taseko had one MIN report in the entire existence of the MIN, the Hamathco, but really it was more Upper Lillooet Provincial Park 4 in the existence of the MIN. And I think the Stave Lake, yeah, that's a solid 0 in Stave Lake. So, but the real point is here is we've grouped them, or we've created these regions in a way that it's very unlikely for somebody in a single day's travel to move across a subregion boundary. So we've kind of followed low terrain, bodies of water, things like that, so that when you choose a subregion, or when we've grouped a subregion, and it's going to be really unlikely for you in one day's travel to be moving from subregion to subregion. So we've given a lot of thought to recreational areas and making it simple for people to know which subregion they're in, or which forecast applies to them. Yeah, moving along. So yeah, here's a really good example of, I can definitely see this situation coming up in the South Rockies. So anybody who's recreated in the Fernie area or in the Lizard Range is probably aware of something called the Fernie effect. And it's something where usually it's like you get Fernied as a forecaster. You forecast 10, maybe 15 centimeters, and then you get hit with 60 centimeters, and then we have to release a morning update, let everybody know about it. So we might still get surprised in Fernie. That might not be going away, but we will be able to make a very visual, impactful statement about the conditions in a place like that, just by highlighting it, like you can see here. So right here, you got the Lizard Range, Fernie Alpine Resort right there smack dab in the middle, and we've highlighted it red for high avalanche danger. So this is the kind of tool that we'll be able to use to make a very, very impactful visual statement about conditions in various places. So much easier to explain this than to kind of tease out a geographic description in the text of a forecast. So definitely an improvement. We're okay with the Fernie effect, though. We want more of those. The more we can get, it just means more snow for the lucky folks in Fernie. And so also important to know that, just because a forecast region is the same color as another forecast region, it doesn't mean that the conditions are the same. All of that means on a technical level is that the highest rating in both of those forecast regions is the same. So these two regions could have a very different setup when we look at like the coastal part of the Northwest Coast and this more inland section. If inland we had like a really touchy surface horror layer below tree line, but not really much going on in the Alpine, like an old wind slab problem that had kind of died away. Maybe we're at like moderate danger or low danger in the Alpine, and we're at like considerable danger below tree line because this surface horror layer is waking up. And then in the coast, we've got like a storm happening with like lots of new snow in the Alpine, new wind slabs, new storm slabs, considerable danger in the Alpine, maybe low danger below tree line for rain and low threshold snowpack or below threshold snowpack. Those will create the same image on the website. So both of those have the highest rating in their forecast is considerable, but they're very different forecasts. So it's important to make sure that you're choosing the area that applies to you, drilling into the details, and in all likelihood, it's going to have something to do with avalanche problems, because this is where the rubber hits the road for you, our users. This is the information, avalanche problems, that help you plan your risk management strategy on the ground during the day. So that's the most likely scenario, is that there's some difference in avalanche problems that has caused us to break off that region so that we can help explain it kind of independently from the surrounding area. But there could be other reasons. We've looked at like weather is a really obvious reason to break off a region. If there's more snow happening in one part of the region and less snowfall happening in another one, we can really highlight it with our region boundaries. It could be, like we were talking about, a persistent slab problem that's kind of lighting up one part of a region. We can use it to highlight that. The general snowpack structure, like what I was just speaking about a moment ago. there's even a little bit of talk about, maybe there's a role for forecast confidence in this too, because some of our more remote areas are quite data sparse, and we don't always know a great deal about what's going on in far-flung places, farther flung places, like say the Humasco ice field. It's really far away. Not many people go there. And maybe there's something about forecast confidence that we can use to break off certain areas. But we're still kind of digging our teeth into the system, and it's probably, we're going to focus on what we think is going to make the forecast easier, easiest to take on and to act on by you, our users. So that's going to be the focus, regardless of what other directions we could go in terms of splitting up regions. The forecasts themselves, so once you drill into or click on a forecast and look at the details, those are the same. So you've still got your headline, danger ratings, terrain and travel advice, avalanche problems, and then forecast details where we talk about snowpack, avalanches, and weather. That's all identical. Same validity period. So we'll still be issuing at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and then it's valid through to the next day. So none of that changes. That part of your experience won't be a big revolutionary change, which I think is a good thing. I think forecasts generally are working well, although we're always looking into ways that we can improve them. I brought up an image of the app here because there's something significant to know about the app this year. The app is no more. So currently it's being redone. So the current iteration of the app, of course, forecasts aren't live just yet, but the app, even when forecasts go live, won't be operating as it was in the past. So you can go ahead and delete that from your phone, but it's coming back, and it's coming back as I want to say this right, PWA. It's a type of app. It's essentially a web app. So in the future, you'll go to our website on your mobile phone, and that itself it'll be a web app on your phone. So, and it's going to speed up the refresh rate. The min is going to be a lot more stable through this web interface. So there's always been, or historically been, a number of issues with the min just being a bit squirrely on the mobile app. So that's going to be much improved. And of course, flexible forecasts will be a part of the new app as well. So stay tuned for that. You won't have to download anything. It's just going to show up on your phone as you go to the avalanche.ca website to check the forecast as usual. So look forward to that. And all the same resources are going to be there: forecasts, min reports, and the whole shebang, all the rest of it. Except that where it says lizard range and flathead, it won't say that anymore because we don't have a forecast region name for that area anymore. Okay, so I'll back up, and this is us kind of starting our process of looking for an avalanche forecast that applies to the area we're going. And since I was talking about Duffy Lake, I've typed Duffy Lake into the search bar up in the top left. I've got a couple of different options. Over time, we'll be making sure that those options are, nice and trim and make sense, because I think there's probably only one Duffy Lake that folks are interested in. I'm curious about where that other one is. Then Duffy Lake Park is the same place, essentially. So we search for a location, step one. Next up, we are going to, did I skip twice? No, danger ratings. So of course I'm going to talk about danger ratings, but just before, I don't want to gloss over this one component of the forecast that's actually really important. It's the headline, and I don't have a separate slide for it, but you can see it there just above where I've made this red circle. Make sure you take a good look at the headline. Forecasters scratch their heads and put a lot of thought into coming up with the headline. It's often at the end of the day after our brains are tired from looking at a lot of different places and a lot of different avalanche information. But if there's one thing that when I'm writing a headline, I'm trying to do, it's this one message that I'm trying to give to the public, to you, to understand the conditions and to help you manage the conditions. So definitely take a look at the headline. Even if you don't go past page 1 and you're stuck on danger ratings, make sure that you're not overlooking that headline. There's really some gold in there, definitely worthwhile. And think carefully about danger ratings. Like I was saying, people do have a hard time actually interpreting them. Did you know that in moderate danger, there's heightened avalanche danger on specific terrain features? And even though natural avalanches are unlikely, human triggered avalanches are possible. So this is worth thinking about. Just because an avalanche has happened or you triggered an avalanche, it doesn't mean it's high danger. It could be moderate danger at that same time. So
And
yeah.
Colin, we do have a raised hand.
Oh.
Parker, do you have a question?
Hey, Parker.
If you can just unmute yourself. Okay, maybe it was an accident.
It happens. Won't be the first. It hasn't been the first and won't be the last. Okay, we'll move right along. So after danger ratings, and I do strongly encourage folks to move beyond just the danger rating component of the forecast. There's so much more that goes into our forecasts. Actually, on the same page, we've got our terrain and travel advice. This moved, it used to be associated with our avalanche problems, and it's moved to danger ratings because there's another piece of kind of like front page information that we want to get into your hands. And really it's a piece of advice that we're giving you based on the conditions to help you manage those conditions. So you can see here, there's a wind slab problem, and we're watching for newly formed and reactive wind slabs as you transition into wind affected terrain, carefully assessing open slopes where surface hoar might be buried, and treating openings below tree line as suspect due to that surface hoar. So even if you got into don't get into the next page of the forecast, you've already got between the headline, the ratings, and that terrain and travel advice, a reasonable understanding of how to deal with conditions, even if we haven't gotten into what the actual avalanche problem is yet. So there's still good info on page 1. Mine that info, make sure you're getting it all. And it's 3 days of info, starting with day 1 of the forecast, which would be at 4 p.m. the following 4 p.m. it's issued for the following day. Avalanche problems is the second tab there. And then you can kind of think of avalanche problems as a risk management strategy. So when we talk about an avalanche problem, we place it in the terrain in terms of which elevation band it exists at, which aspects it exists on, and then we talk about the likelihood of triggering an avalanche and the potential size, the destructive size of that avalanche, whether it's small, large, or the relative size of the avalanche, small, large, or very large. And then you'll get a little bit of information with every avalanche problem. There'll be a maximum of 3 on every forecast. So we try not to overload people too much. You'll get a little bit of information underneath those kind of problem icons that basically tell you something about what is this problem and where did it come from. So, is this a wind slab where winds have been loading lee aspects and around terrain features at higher elevations and wind exposed places? Or is this like a buried layer of surface hoar that you can't see on the surface and it's affecting kind of like open glades below tree line? It's maybe 40 or 60 centimeters deep, those kinds of descriptors, kind of telling you a little bit of a history and what the problem's all about. But you've got a lot of the management strategies already through the headline and the terrain and travel advice. So that's essentially what we're talking about with avalanche problems. What, where, what's the size and likelihood? Oh yeah, and I want to mention I go into this a little later. AvSavvy, it's an avalanche tutorial tutorial that we've got on the website. It's kind of our updated tutorial, and there's a really cool section on avalanche problems, and it's like interactive. You can apply them to the terrain and choose your safe route through the terrain, avoiding the avalanche problems that affect the terrain that you've chosen. And then more details. This is where you can kind of geek out a little bit, and I strongly encourage you to, especially if you're at that AST1 and beyond level. This should be the stuff that you're wanting to glean from the forecast. So you're always going to get a summary of recent avalanche activity. We might talk a little bit about where we see that avalanche activity going into the future. And really, there's a reason this is at the top of the details section. Avalanche activity itself, in terms of avalanche information, nothing's more impactful, nothing's more important than actual avalanches. We call this in the business class 1 data. So avalanches speak to avalanche conditions like nothing else can. So definitely read into the avalanche summary, and that's going to give you a little bit of what we've been seeing in the backcountry and what we've been seeing in avalanche terrain, what professionals have been been triggering with explosives or ski cutting, those kinds of things. Not everybody has explosives they can go throw, I hope, into the backcountry to see if they can trigger avalanches, but there's a lot of professionals that do, and we can really get a lot of information from that testing and the results that they see. Next, you're going to get an in-depth look at the snowpack structure. And, if you're the kind of person who wants to, know what's into the snow, maybe dig into the snow when you're out there, pick out all the layering, maybe try your hand at some snowpack tests. Or if you're just curious about what we think is important about the snowpack, what are the critical avalanche layers that we're thinking about, check this section out. And then finally, there's a region-specific weather forecast. So we create this especially for the region that we've identified here every day. And it's kind of like the Avalanche Canada mountain weather forecast, which I'll talk about next. It's focused on the mountains. We're not talking about the valley. We're not talking about temperatures or wind or precipitation in town. We're talking about what it's going to be like at elevation. So this is an important part of our workflow as forecasters, and allows us to move the snowpack structure forward in time. And, if you're looking at ratings and you're wondering, why does that day 3 rating, why does it go up to high when it's only at moderate right now? Take a look at the weather forecast. You should be able to take that snowpack summary, slap the weather on top of it, and then the rating should become a lot more clear in terms of the direction that things are going in, the trend that we're seeing. And there's almost always some kind of weather connection to those subsequent days in the forecast. So definitely worth looking at. And then a confidence statement. It's easy to overlook this one. We rate our confidence in our assessment as either low, moderate, or high. And we'll always have some kind of reasoning, especially if we're at the lower end, like lower moderate. We're going to explain why our confidence isn't high. And you can see in this forecast, the precipitation amounts are uncertain. So that's going to have a big bearing on what avalanche danger is going to be the following day. So this forecaster wasn't able to go to high confidence. And so this maybe tells you a little bit about how you should approach your day in the mountains too. If the forecaster's at low confidence, I probably wouldn't have like super high confidence in the assessment and be ready to make observations as I'm traveling and kind of measure my observations against what the forecaster expected. Especially important, if forecast precipitations amounts are uncertain, take a look at what those forecast precipitation amounts are in the weather summary. And if what you see in the field is different from those expectations, why, you can add that last piece to the puzzle. You can make the forecast more confident if it matches up, that is. So I want to talk about the Avalanche Canada Mountain Weather Forecast. You click on resources on the homepage. Mountain Weather Forecast is the first link under planning. And this is probably the next most amazing feature on the website. It's actually not created by us in the Avalanche in the forecast office. It's created by our good friends at Environment Canada. So they create a blog for us where an actual human forecaster talks about conditions in the mountains or forecast weather for the mountains over the main focus is in the first couple of days, and then there's additional information for days 3 through 7 that it gets a little bit fuzzier as we go out into the future, as all weather forecasts do. So this synopsis tab here that I've circled, you've got the blog entry here where you're getting kind of the big picture of weather, synopsis. That tells us we're talking about the province as a whole. So you're talking about the big weather systems that are moving over the province, whether it's a system of high pressure, low pressure, or a parade of storms that's moving over the province. Something about that big picture of weather is what you'll find here, as well as in the animation that you can just see the top of on the slide there. You'd click play on the animation and it would cycle through, showing you your 12-hour precip amounts, as well as thicknesses and heights on your map, but I won't get into the weather details. And there's lots of other cool tabs on the side. But definitely, if you don't click on anything else in the mountain weather forecast, I strongly recommend at least clicking on the day 1 right up here, because day 1 gets this overlay of the fronts and pressure pattern and the type of precipitation that's present, or maybe wind, basically major weather features that, again, a human forecaster has gone in here and said and pointed to these things with their knowledge of the forecast and written. This is not like a computer output. A person has put this together for us. So there's not many weather products out there, not so many weather products out there where an actual human forecaster is interacting with the product. This is one of them. So it's definitely worth taking a look at. And then day 2 is very similar. And then, like I was saying, days 3 through 7, they get a little bit fuzzier and the products change a little bit to talk about longer range outlook. And then the tabs along the side, there's lots of really cool information here. Think about separating between forecast conditions and current conditions. So like our actual condition on the ground will be in those bottom tabs under radar, satellites, temperatures, etc. And then up top, we've got the forecast. And then a really great tab here, really fun to watch the swirling colors, especially at a time like this, when we've got lots of storms hitting the province. Click on the hourly precipitation and you'll get an idea of what how much precip is falling per hour over the period that's covered by the slides. And then you've got the color scale telling you how much precip that is. And then for actuals, I just pulled up a radar image here too. So that's an important thing to look at too, not only the forecast weather, but the actual weather that's happening on the ground. And we've got that right there. So worth taking a look at. So I'll switch now into some more like the educational resources on the site. And maybe one of the first ones or big ideas to think about is that, training season is upon us. And I think it wasn't so long ago, we were all gathered together in Revelstoke, at least a forecast team, and up in the mountains and doing some of our early season training. Our field teams will be starting up in the next couple of weeks here, going to get do their setup for their programs. And so this is kind of what it's going to look like in mountains around British Columbia over the next few weeks here, with different ski hill and heli ski and cat ski operators out there training and getting ready for the season. And I hope that you'll consider doing some of that training too, because there's no way to train for avalanche incidents quite like putting yourself through a simulation of the real thing here. And so we do that on a regular basis, on a seasonal basis, get out there and actually test our skills, make sure that we can use our transceivers, shovels, and probes, make sure that we can dig effectively. Like you can see this conveyor belt digging that's going on in one slide there, and actually perform an extrication, get somebody out of the backcountry after you've taken them out of the snow. Yeah, so make sure you take advantage of this time and get in there with your backcountry buddies to make sure that everybody's at the same level. Onto those educational resources. So again, under the Learn tab rather than the Resources tab, you go to AvCan Training, and then you'll see some of our different courses. Like I was talking about, there's a few different levels of course that we provide the curriculum for. We don't actually provide the courses ourselves, but we've designed the curriculum for the AST1, Avalanche Skills Training 1, 2, the MAT course, which is Managing Avalanche Terrain, and the Companion Rescue Skills course. And I encourage people to move through that training program, ticking off those different programs on the list to make sure that their skills are fresh. And if it's been a while since you took your last AST1 or something like that, think about taking a Managing Avalanche Terrain, think about taking a Companion Rescue Skills. And we've actually got a new AST1 refresher course that's running this year. And maybe we've got a link or something like that to providers who are offering it, but we've also got, under that same Learn tab, you can see the very bottom link under training, find a course, and that's going to link you up with courses and providers all over the province, or all over the country actually, because we've got courses happening everywhere. We don't, but avalanche course providers too. Make sure that you choose a licensed avalanche course provider so they're using the Avalanche Canada curriculum. I was talking about this a little earlier, AvSavvy, a really cool tool. It's basically our online avalanche tutorial that's kind of next gen. We've kind of brought it forward in time, and there's some really cool interactive features, videos, interactive content, a much better layout than we had in the past, optimized for web and mobile viewing, lots of new photos. So it's not like super old school winter gear. You can see like modern photos and people that look like they've been in the photo and it's not 20 years old, and some really cool quizzes. And like I was saying, like interactive route challenges and things like that. I worked on some of the route challenges, and they're really fun to do and test your skills on. The daily process is a really good, if nothing else, I'd say the daily process is one of the best parts of AvSavvy, where you learn about the process to follow while you're planning and executing a day in the backcountry. And then one of the things that you'll probably learn on a course are the Avalanche Essentials. So I want to make this a little bit interactive and put it out there to the audience. Who can tell me what are the Avalanche Essentials? They're pieces of equipment. and I want to hear it live. So somebody's got to raise their hand. They've got to tell me what are the avalanche essentials. There's 3 of them. Any hands up?
You sure do. I think the
this-
first hand was Verity Stowe. So I'm just
Okay.
going to unmute her mic now.
Nice. Verity, nice to hear from you. The suspense is killing me.
I know.
I think you need to maybe unmute her, or she needs to unmute herself.
I've hit the unmute on my side.
Okay.
I'll give it one more try and then I'll try the next person.
Either she's confused, or just very, very nervous. That's okay too. Anyone else want to take a swing at the avalanche essentials?
I'm wondering if we actually maybe have an issue with the way that the webinars. I'm wondering if it's a Zoom glitch, because this has happened a couple of times in this webinar, and it looks like it should work from our side. I will try the next person on the list, which is
They've tried
Mark
again.
Wells. So I'll try Mark.
Okay. Mark, do we have you?
I don't know. Do you?
Yeah, we've got you. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for chiming in. What do you got for avalanche essentials?
A probe.
Yes. That's one of them.
A shovel.
Yes.
And a beacon.
Yes. Okay. So I'll give you 2.95 on that one. So we call them transceivers now because they transmit and receive signals. Beacons are one-way communication devices. So we always try to improve our language around this. And so you didn't make a mistake. Beacon is just fine I would get in trouble for saying beacon. And what we specifically want is a modern 3-antenna digital avalanche transceiver, preferably with a marking function. So I don't expect you to know all that or to be able to recite all that, but that's part of my job. So thank you very much. So those are the avalanche essentials on the left-hand side there. My screen's oriented correctly. Transceiver, shovel, and probe. And you can see it's not like for shoveling the snow off your sidewalk. It's like the real deal avalanche shovel, avalanche rescue shovel. Same with the probe. It's not a ski pole. And then the recommended gear that you see here, definitely worthwhile things to have in the toolkit. An airbag, those are getting really, really popular. Satellite messaging devices, really great way of sending for help if the situation arises where you need to. And then what better way than a radio to keep in touch with the people that you're in the terrain with, but maybe a bit too distant to yell over the ridge to. So yeah, just remember that those recommended pieces of gear definitely don't trump or don't mean that you don't need to carry the essential gear there. Great. So forecaster blogs are another really cool resource on the site. We produce these on a kind of semi-regular basis when we think that there's something that we kind of need to dig into about conditions to help people understand them. So you'll often see really kind of techie topics talking about like this, tricky snowpacks, atmospheric rivers, interesting graphics and things like that, where we kind of try to dig into the conditions. And it's usually when there's something maybe a little bit tricky, so, as you can see here. I've said tricky a couple of times, but yeah, sometimes people get the idea that, oh, if I stay in the trees, I'll be safe from avalanches. Well, that's not always the case. Actually, in openings in the trees below tree line, that's like a place where surface ore, that really beautiful feathery crystal that you see, really loves to grow. And when that stuff gets buried and it doesn't get blown away or hit by rain or melt away or anything like that, that's like a really nasty weak layer in the snowpack. So it's times like that when we're really trying to maybe talk about something counterintuitive that we'll get into putting out a forecaster blog. We'll probably do something about flexible forecasts so that the information that we're talking about here kind of gets it out to a broader audience. And very likely, I think we have something slated for this coming Friday for just a conditions outlook, because we're getting our first forecast going. It's definitely worth talking about kind of the big picture of conditions. So look forward to those. Another really important resource on the website. I don't want to say it's the most important or like third most important. We're into the kind of the weeds at that point, but this is a really good one. It's the Mountain Information Network. You've heard me reference it a couple of times, and you'll actually be looking at the Mountain Information Network when you're looking at our map. Every one of the blue pins here, this is the sneak peek map. So there's only a few mins. I think we already have more mins than this on our map, which is amazing. Each of the blue pins is a MIN report, Mountain Information Network report, where people have told us about conditions that they saw during the day. If there's a red dot in the blue pin, it means they were involved with or witnessed an avalanche incident. So really, really, that's that class 1 information. Really, really important to check those out. If you were going to be heading to a place like, I think I see Mount Hall or something like that, in one of the avalanche incidents, and I was going to be going there the next day. I'd want to know if there was an avalanche in the place that I'm thinking about heading to, especially if it was the kind of avalanche problem that sticks around. So yeah, definitely worth clicking on those. And you don't need to be an expert to put a min out there. This is regular members of public. It's actually probably better if it's not super avalanche jargony, the way that you're describing conditions, because we want it to work for everybody. And we'll know what you're talking about in the office if you don't use the jargon. We understand just plain old English too. So we definitely want your mins. And this time of year is actually really important for us because the kind of professional data streams or channels, they aren't really running yet. And so if we can get some public data channels happening, it's really, really beneficial. I saw a min at the end of the day yesterday that was just like blew my mind. It was up in Shames and, up in the terrace area. And the weather station was showing me something like 16 millimeters of snow had fallen. Okay, yeah, that's something of precipitation had fallen. And up at elevation, I expected that to be snow. But then I see a min that tells me there's 40 centimeters on the ground in some places. Like, okay, yeah. So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't have seen that min. So really nice to see those observations from folks. And like this McRae Peak, we see an avalanche in the image here. Nothing more impactful than that. If I was going to head to this area the next day, I'd want to know that there had been avalanches going on. Maybe this had blown in again with new snow over that bed surface and just ready to avalanche again. So sharing is caring. Don't be shy. We need / want, praise, love your observations. So keep them coming. Local crowdsourced observations. Here's Idaho Peak, another avalanche on a grass slope. This is a very early season. This was actually an early season min from a few years ago. And like, what a impactful early season image this is. Smooth grass slope, took what, 30, 40 centimeters of snow to make that turn that into avalanche terrain. Definitely some things to think about, points to ponder for this time of year. And that's not the only reason to do it. We give away cool gear too. So, you submit a min, maybe you'll get min of the week. Maybe you'll get a sweet Avalanche Canada hat or some other cool piece of gear. So definitely there's more than one reason to get in there and share your obs with us. And like I say, it doesn't need to be professional. I'd say if there's one thing to try to include in your min, a photo or multiple photos is great. There's all kinds of information that you might not think that we can get from a photo, but I can see, whether the snow has blown out of the trees from the wind or melted out of the trees, or if there's like pine needles littered on the ground that tell me there's been wind and no new snow since then. I can see how deep your ski tracks are that tell me how much powder snow is available for transport if the wind kicks up. Might see all kinds of other things, crusts on the snow with a little bit of glaze, that kind of stuff. So all those little pieces of information are really helpful for us. So photos are great too. So don't forget the checklist. You want to get the gear, get the training, get the forecast in its new form. And most importantly, like we talked about at the beginning, we want you to get home safe. That's what it's all about. So I think I can probably open it up to questions. And maybe while we're waiting on questions, and you can raise your hand or you can type them in, do we have a question right off the bat? Not yet. Maybe while we're waiting on a question, we can throw a poll out there. Who has checked out the min before? Lisa, can you launch that one still?
Yes.
Awesome. And then that'll give you some moments to come up with your question. So have you used the min? Oh, I've got this right over the screen. Have you used the min to observe posts, to check out the posts of others? You can put me down for a yes. Checked it out today. There's another good one up at Shames today, keeping us in the loop, finger on the pulse. Nice. People are using them in. And those who didn't, hey, that's cool. Now you know, right? You know where to find it. So definitely check it out in the future or even in the present, because there's lots out there already, especially if you're going somewhere in the mountains. Now, if there's no questions, we've got one more on the min. How about, have you ever posted to the min? This one I'd be a little more surprised, a little bit more surprised to see as many yeses, but I'd be pleasantly surprised if I did. And it's okay to say if you don't. It's like I said, it's a silent poll, or what do they say?
Secret ballot.
Secret ballot. Thank you, Sarah. It's getting late. Secret ballot. Nobody's gonna make fun of you for not having posted them in. We'll not know who you are. Because if we did, oh, you'd hear about it. And has anybody come up with, oh, we've got a mostly no's, which is not surprising. Okay, so hopefully some of that stuff that I said about, it not being important to be a professional, like snow person, to submit them in, hopefully that hits home with you. Because actually, I've read quite a few mins that have like jargon in them sometimes, and it's sometimes a bit of a bummer. It's like, yeah, I get what this person's talking about, but wouldn't it be nice if everybody knew what this person was talking about? So definitely, even if you've got that jargon and you've got that ability to do that, a more impressive way of relaying those observations is to use plain old English and photos.
Great. And Colin, we've gotten a couple of questions.
Nice.
The first question is there anywhere I can find weather history? So for example, how much precipitation actually fell and at what temperature and in areas, as opposed to what was forecast?
Yes, definitely. So one of the best places to do this is, I have to say, is right on the Avalanche Canada webpage. So I'm just going to go back to, is this image going to work? Yeah, check out this one. You see there's these like black icons. They've got like some of them have numbers next to them, which tells you how many of them there are in that small area. If you zoom in, each one of these is a weather station that we display the weather for. So I can't remember how far back the weather history goes on each of those, but it's definitely enough that you can kind of put together the weather history from the last couple of days. And yeah, we've chosen weather stations that we think are really important. So they're ones that generally gather snow information, wind information, temperatures, where it's worth kind of figuring out some of these stations, like knowing some of the key ones. If I was in Glacier National Park, I'd be interested in how much snow fell at Fidelity, even though I think Fidelity that's on the Parks Canada website. That's maybe not the best example. Maybe the Duffy Lake area. I'd be interested in Blowdown Peak to know what the winds are doing at elevation. And I might check out Cayush Summit to know how much precipitation fell. So it does take a little bit of time to kind of figure out the ins and outs of which stations are best for which information, but sometimes where they are in the terrain and where they are relative to recreational areas is all you really need to know.
Great.
And often, the ones at elevation won't necessarily measure snow because it's tough to measure snow when the wind's blowing it around all over the place. And the ones that are down at the valley, they won't do a great job with wind because the mountains are in the way. So that tells you a little bit about what their value is too. And same with temperature at different elevations, where the freezing level is. You might need to check a few different stations to figure that one out.
Great. And then we have a question from Mark. The question is, when is the new mobile version of the website rolling out?
That's a good question. I think it's like top priority in our IT department right now. Now that like flexible forecast is good to go, we're ready to start producing forecasts with it. They've already, like a few days ago, they switched gears to the mobile app. So I don't think I can give you like a release date or anything like that, but it's top priority. It's happening very soon.
Great. This next question is, with regions no longer defined by name, how will you roll out special public avalanche warnings?
Yeah, and basically in the same way that we would create a forecast region, we can create with those same subregions, we can group together those subregions and create a special public avalanche warning that would cover the subregion allotment that we've determined. And that might even paint over multiple forecast regions. So you might see, we haven't released a special public avalanche warning with the new system yet, but it basically will look like, I believe, an overlay on top of the existing forecast regions. It'll be really obvious, and then we'd have the SPA, the special public avalanche warning banner at the top of the page as well, and be very clear about what area it affects. I think it would be hard to miss which parts of the region it would affect. And actually, historically, we've done this before. We've not necessarily with special public avalanche warnings, but we had a special information campaign a few years ago when we had an avalanche or like a snowpack structure issue that affected a whole bunch of regions, but not all of each one of them. It was kind of like a bit of a band up the Rocky Mountain Trench and into the North Rockies. And we kind of had to find a way to create this kind of overlay that could convey that. We called it the bird. It kind of looked like a bird because of the shape that it took at the time. But yeah, I think actually with special public avalanche warnings, it's going to be even easier because we won't have to like hum and haw over, oh, it's only in this part of the region, but not in this part of the region. We can just chop it up as we see fit now using those subregions.
Great. This next question is from Robin. The question is, will the forecast be generally updated at the same time this year?
Yes. So forecast issue time, it's 4 p.m. is like the goal. Every forecaster is trying to issue their products by 4 p.m. Occasionally there can be a little bit of a delay on the, especially in really active periods when there's lots of change happening. It can take a little bit of extra time for forecaster for all the regions to make their way out, but generally forecasts are starting to go out by 4. Usually it's pretty rare that there's still any remaining by like 6 o'clock. It's quite rare. I suppose it can happen. And then we do issue updates in the morning occasionally. So we have a morning forecaster that rolls into the office at 6 o'clock in the morning. They evaluate all the overnight weather to make sure that it actually conforms to what we expected the overnight weather to do. And if there are significant changes that push a region into one or another danger rating, especially if it's elevating their danger rating, we'll issue an update to the forecast. And depending on what we perceive to be the seriousness of the case, we might issue some social media, like a social media blast as well, to make sure the message gets out there to folks. And that'll usually happen by about 7 a.m. Pacific.
Great. This next question is from Eugene, and Colin, I'm not sure if you can show, but the question is, can you show where on the website the min is? Maybe just highlight that resources tab.
Yeah, that's the kind of the fun
actually
thing
go
is
to
like
it.
you're kind of looking at the min when you're looking at avalanche.ca at the map. So maybe I'm going to make this window really small. Oh no, it doesn't work like that. Hold on, see if I can grab the corner. Can I do this? I can. Okay. Down in the bottom left-hand corner of the map, does that work? Where I've kind of like highlighted it there, bottom left-hand corner, that's where you would create a min report from that button there. And then the reports themselves, you can find by clicking on the blue dots. So that's essentially it. The min's kind of like an interface on the map page. It's not like its own website or web page on avalanche.ca. It's kind of like this thing that's kind of based on the map and just that where you would click to enter your report and the reports themselves on the map. There's a page on avalanche.ca that kind of talks about the min, that kind of describes the project, kind of the what it's all about. And I believe that's under resources. I'm going to go to that.
It is under resources, and under resources as well, you can also find a list of min reports. So sometimes looking at them on the map can be confusing, and you can also get them in a list view there. Depending on what you're using them for and how
the min list view is actually pretty great, because then you get everything kind of sorted by time a little bit more easily. And yeah, I like that too. Depends what interface you prefer. Some people like a list, some people like to see where they are on the map. And it's worth looking at too, that where was it? I've got that, yes, this slide here with the hamburger menu, we called it, in the top left there. So when you click that one, you see the Mountain Information Network link that shows up there. There's a little drop down for it. That's a date filter or a time range filter. So you can choose mins from 1 day, 3 days, or 7 days, if memory serves correctly. So you could, obviously the most recent mins are always, the most recent reports are always the most valid in terms of like the current, they're the closest to the current weather picture. So sometimes that filtering is quite helpful, but if you're in remote areas that don't get mins very often, sometimes you'll take what you can get, and the older mins might be what you can get.
Great, thanks.
No problem.
Colin, this next question is from Wade. The question is there any evidence around the Avi balloon or Avi lung? Are those still popular?
Yeah, both of those are still reasonable tools to have in the backcountry avalanche travel, avalanche safety toolkit. I don't know if the avalanche, or sorry, the avalung is still in production. That would be worth a little bit of research on our part, or on one of our parts, to find out if it's still being produced. I have a feeling it's gone out of production, but they may still be available out there. I think the focus has maybe changed toward airbags. And yeah, so can I maybe I can just clarify the question. So regarding airbags, what are we asking again?
The question is, it says, is there any evidence around? And I assume it means around the effectiveness.
The efficacy. Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And there have been studies in Europe, and there have been studies in North America with airbags. There's been slightly different results in both places because the character of the avalanche terrain in those two continents is quite different. And so some of the more encouraging or supportive research results have occurred in Europe, where you've got large, big planar alpine slopes, and some of the more the furthest I'd go would be maybe inconclusive results would be in places where terrain traps or things like cliffs, rocks, trees introduce the potential for trauma to happen during an avalanche. That can complicate the efficacy of an airbag, in the sense that it's not always asphyxiation that injures or kills avalanche victims. It's often trauma. And so airbags, importantly, protect people from trauma in some ways, because they kind of protect the head and neck area. But part of the principle of an airbag is it kind of keeps you on the surface of the avalanche as the avalanche moves through the terrain. So you're less able to self-arrest if you've got an airbag that's been deployed. And so that prolongs the period where you'd be moving through downslope and exposing yourself to potential trauma. So it's a little bit more complicated in that kind of terrain. But yeah, there's good research to suggest that airbags are a very valuable tool for avalanche safety. Absolutely. They definitely don't replace those other tools, though, those avalanche essentials.
Great. And then we have one raised hand. Robin, did you have a question? Do you want to come off mute to ask your question?
That's okay. You can type it in too, or it was an accident, and that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else? Flex forecasts, Flex FX. Other questions about Avalanche Canada in general? Stoke for the forecasts going out on Friday, 4 p.m. sharp. Looking forward to that. Wondering what the map's going to look like. We're all wondering. Okay, well, maybe we can leave it at that. I think we're a little over time, so that went pretty well, I think. Good set of questions. Thanks, folks. Okay, well, I think I'll hand it back to Sarah. Maybe we can play us out with that awesome Stoke video. I can watch that like all day. And thank you everybody for joining us once again. It's a real pleasure to connect with you, as always, doing these webinars. We're going to keep doing them throughout the winter season, and yeah, we're hoping to see you the next one. What is the next one, Sarah?
The next one that is a good question that I was not ready for.
That's okay.
It's okay. I just need to pull up the piece of writing that I have in front of me here. The next one is December 14th, and it's Off the Line, which is a great presentation about choosing the line. Before everybody logs off, though, we do actually have some prizes to give away.
Of course,
which you can only win if you are still logged in. So before you disappear, hold on. So we have a couple of different prizes that we are going to give away tonight. The first one is this lovely, I don't know if you can see that because of the background.
It's like a cloaking device.
Neck gaiter. It is like a cloaking device. There we go. Got it. Okay. And Lisa is going to give us the name of the winner for that one.
Great. The first winner is Kate Boyle.
Awesome. So if that is you, drop us an email to producer@avalanche.ca and we'll get that on its way to you. Our next prize is this lovely Arc'teryx toque, held away from the camera so you can see it. And Lisa, who's won that one?
Our second winner is Carol Ann Nickel.
Excellent. So again, drop us an email to producer@avalanche.ca. And our third prize tonight is another fancy avalanche, Arc'teryx Duke, the avalanches in the brain. And the winner for that one is
Amir Conlu.
excellent. Thank you very
Awesome.
much to our sponsors for providing those prizes, and drop us an email to grab those. There are many resources on our website to help you learn about avalanche safety and how to plan your trips into the backcountry. And as Colin mentioned, a great place to start is our AvSavvy tutorial. So if you haven't checked that out yet, make sure that you do. We really appreciate your interest in avalanche safety, and you can help support our essential programs and the things that we do by donating. You can donate as little as $10 if you can afford it, and that really does help to support our programs and to keep us going. If you would like to donate, there'll be a link in the chat box. So as I mentioned, our next webinar is going to be December 14th. You'll need to pre-register if you want to join in with that one. It is going to be presented by Grant Helgeson, who is an Avalanche Canada forecaster and product manager. He is actually one of the brainchilds around our new flexible forecast system. So he's really on his game. And this presentation is to do with choosing your line and working out when it's good to go, when it's not good to go, and what kinds of things you might be looking for to make sure that you have a safe day in the backcountry. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight and showing an interest in avalanche safety. We really hope that your winter in the backcountry is fun, wonderful, and safe from avalanches. Good night.